Go to London, where over the weekend 300,000 pro-Palestinian protesters converged on central London, making it one of the biggest marches in British history. Around 150 demonstrators were detained, 9 police officers injured. Some officers were injured, preventing a violent crowd, getting to the cenotaph while a remembrance service took place. Really disgusting stuff, isn't it? Joining me on the ground is Tom Slater, editor for Spiked Online and a contributor to the UK's Spectator magazine. Tom, thank you for your time. I was in London a couple of weeks ago. I saw a very large rally, 100,000 or so in and around Piccadilly, but 300,000, I was shocked you had them there again on this Remembrance Day weekend. I thought they would have stayed away in deference to the historical and respectful tone of the weekend, but not the case. How have British people responded to this?
I think British people are sickened by what they're seeing, because what we're witnessing here really is the birth or the explosion of an anti-Semitic street protest movement. That's essentially what this is. We shouldn't mince words about it. I mean, what we saw on Saturday at this supposed March for Peace was people repeating Arabic war slogans about the slaughter of Jews in the 7th century. There's video footage of people saying "kill all the Jews" quite openly. There's placards in which the Star of David is presented with a swastika in the heart of it, and people suggesting that Gaza is paired with Auschwitz. Again, racist taunt after racist taunt. And even if you want to dismiss that as a few bad apples, as a lot of people, particularly on the British left, have tried to do, the organisers of this march, the Daily Telegraph did an investigation the other week. Half of the groups who are behind organising these marches have links to Hamas, and not even kind of 6 degrees of separation. We're talking about one of the groups in particular was founded by a former Hamas chief who for some reason now lives in London. So we need to take this very, very seriously. I think not since the black shirts have we seen such a sustained intimidatory presence on Britain's streets in menacing the Jewish community. And what sickens me most is that there are still many people in positions of influence who don't seem to be taking it that seriously at all.
No, and I do not want to be accused of downplaying the anti-Semitism, but I have to say there's an anti-Christian element now creeping into a lot of these protests. So if you think you're not Jewish and it doesn't bother you, or something you shouldn't have to worry about, I tell you do, because the saying goes, doesn't it, they came for me and then they will come for you. Home Secretary Suella Braverman, she really went after the police. She said they play favourites when it comes to protesters. She made the point about COVID. We saw that here. The Black Lives Matter protesters, well, they were fine, but anyone else who was out there not doing what they should have been during lockdown, they were taken to task by the police. There's been calls for her to resign, but also a lot of Brits saying she needs to keep speaking out. Give us the take, or your take, on the sort of the issue with British police.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that Suella Braverman is absolutely right to suggest that the police have remarkable double standards where protests and free speech are concerned. During lockdown, she made this example herself. You had anti-lockdown protesters who had their collars felt, were fined, were arrested. Within weeks, we had the Black Lives Matter protests in which they got a much softer hand, shall we say, and even were greeted by some police officers who decided to take the knee. In recent days, there's been a scandal in this country over a gender-critical woman who's been interviewed by the police because she supposedly misgendered someone on the internet. Meanwhile, you've got anti-Semitic slogans being chanted with seeming impunity on Britain's streets. So on that question, I think it's completely unassailable. And to be honest, the response from many people suggesting that she's undermining the police and so on, these are rightful criticisms. I understand that the point that she is the Home Secretary, she's in a position to do things about this. She shouldn't be carrying on just like a pundit, carping from the sidelines. I get that criticism. But to suggest that it was illegitimate of her to raise these concerns, that these things don't exist, I think is ridiculous. And I've been very dismayed by the way in which this discussion of these marches has just become effectively a kind of rage against Suella Braverman, rather than talking about the actual issues involved. But naturally, it's all just become using her as a kind of punch bag rather than dealing with the proper issues that we need to confront in this issue.
Tom, I'm just about out of time, but just quickly, I mean, the commentary that I've listened to over the last 48 hours says that these protests are going to continue every single weekend. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like for the foreseeable future, they're showing no signs of abating. It was the biggest one that we've seen so far. And I think ordinary people really need to take this very, very seriously. I don't want to see a crackdown. I don't think you can fight this kind of hatred with censorship, but I think everyone does need to stand up against these protests because of the open bigotry on display, because of how much British Jews are being menaced at this point, and also because of a point that you made, which is that anti-Semitism is a particularly deranging form of racism. When a society has such open expressions of it, you know you're going down a particularly dark path. So I would just urge everyone with a conscience, essentially, to oppose what is going on, because history won't be kind to those people who don't.
Tom Slater, thank you. I'll make the point, though, in France, too, over the weekend, 100,000 marched against anti-Semitism, so that gives me some hope. And if I think Emmanuel Macron is on the wrong tram with the idea of a ceasefire.